Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this evening, even if it's from the comfort of your own living room. My name is John Bowders. I have the pleasure of serving as the mayor of Emeryville this year. And what I would love to do is to orient you to how this evening's town hall will go. This is a town hall that has been set up by the city to facilitate the continuation of a discussion we began a number of months ago related to important needs that the city has for residents and the services we deliver, and to talk about some of the ideas you all might have for ways in which we can improve and support the continued access that Emeryville residents enjoy to a high quality of life and quality of services. So this is a Zoom meeting, and I recognize that I probably participate in many more of these than some of you have to do, and want to just orient you to how this meeting will go. It's a town hall format. So the city council is not here. It's not a Brown Act meeting, as we say. It's not a publicly noticed meeting, but we are conducting this meeting to encourage your participation and input. So at the bottom of your Zoom bar, if you're on a laptop, if you hover over the Zoom features, you'll see at the bottom there is a Q&A box. That will be how we take questions and answers. This meeting is being recorded. The reason being is that we will put this meeting on the city's website so that members of the public who could not attend the meeting this evening will be afforded the opportunity to hear what the discussion was, or what comments members had. We are asking you to use the Q&A feature, and so that, one, we can provide equitable access to speaking time to anybody who wishes to speak or provide an idea. You don't have to have a question to provide input, so you can use the Q&A box to simply provide input as we request that during the evening. And it'll be an opportunity also for us to record in writing your input. I'll go over in a moment here some of the other ways in which you can provide input on the discussion item for tonight's town hall. We've budgeted about 60 minutes for this meeting. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus the conversation at the outset on the topic at hand, which is the discussion of unmet needs in the city of Emeryville, places where residents like yourselves would like to see the city spend more time or effort or investment in addressing important needs in the city, and then some of your ideas for how we could best do that. When we've kind of exhausted those questions, and one of the reasons we're using the Q&A feature is to ensure that we get to those first. Once we've exhausted those questions, then with the time that remains, I'll be available to answer just other general questions that members of the public have about any other program or service. Maybe you just are curious about a particular development in the city, and we can talk about that as well. Okay, so with that understanding, I have a very brief slide presentation to open us, and I will share my screen here to do that. Give me one moment. So I say, give me one moment. Here we go. Okay. So you all should be able to now see this PowerPoint presentation. So this is a very brief PowerPoint presentation just to help orient folks to what we're doing here in the city of Emeryville. So as everyone knows, for the last couple of years, cities, including Emeryville, around the Bay Area and across the country have experienced a significant upheaval in the way we commonly do our business with the COVID pandemic. I'm really grateful to the city staff and to all the healthcare professionals across Alameda County and here in the city of Emeryville for providing us with the information and support we need in order to help us move through the COVID pandemic and get to a place where we are today. I'll figure out how to move to the next thing. There we go. So just as an overview, this is what we're going to talk about just at a high level. And for those who are questioning about, who are submitting questions already, just to let you know, we are going to take questions only by Q&A in writing. We're not going to be doing public time tonight orally, just to keep everybody with the equal opportunity to speak equally. And I will address some of the comments I've already been receiving when we get to that chance. So we're going to do an overview of what the city is doing, the city services, programs, and needs, and then what are you thinking about when it comes to what the city of Emeryville could be doing more of or better. Just as a background on the city of Emeryville, as many of you know, we're home to 13,000 residents. We have close to 30,000 daytime visitors or employees here in the city. So our size triples during the daytime hours, and that creates significant impacts that we all live with as residents in this community, from the influx of guests in the form of traffic, in the form of commerce, in the form of demands on support services. So one of the key pieces that we want to talk about and have you think about this evening is how can the city of Emeryville's residents benefit from these types of demands without costing and being at the sole expense of Emeryville residents. The city council and the city staff are really committed to creating vibrant, livable neighborhoods. We've been very excited to open a number of new city parks in the past few years to create some dedicated people-oriented spaces for public enjoyment and use. And we're excited that we have some new businesses and companies coming in who are really progressive and thinking about the future of not just our community, but the planet, and opportunities for us to be a livable urban community. But as was noted, our urban community is impacted by visitors, and that has a number of different impacts on us that comes in different ways. There's a lot of people using our city streets. There's a lot of people using businesses and facilities. People come to enjoy our parks as well. And while we welcome those guests because they provide much needed tax revenue to the city and they help diversify our daytime experience, that is at a cost at times to residents. And so we want to talk a little bit about that tonight. We're known as a hub of creativity and innovation. So you all are probably familiar with Pixar is here and Cliff Bar is here, and a number of world leaders in the areas of creative innovation exist here. We have a lot of life science buildings in town, and we've really generated a lot of interest in our little hamlet here in the East Bay as a place for people to come and live and work. And we're recognized in a larger sense as a regional and statewide leader on several issues that we're very proud of. We've been, if you follow anything in the newspaper, you've known that we've been regarded as a leader on housing. We are a leader on environmental justice and remediation efforts to make our city sustainable and environmentally friendly. And we've been promoting livability and quality of life improvements in the city for our residents over the past number of years. So what do our city services look like today? Well, you are probably enjoying many of them, and without recognizing or knowing the city staff who help put those services in place. So the city has several obligations to ensuring that residents have the services that they need. Vibrant neighborhoods are important, and the Emeryville Police Department and the Alameda County Fire Department offer us public safety and emergency services. We benefit from having really high quality response times, and requests for service are met in a safe and timely manner. We have really safe streets and roads. So we have one of the highest street ratings in the county in terms of our paving plan, and the city's staff annually plan to repave our streets on a regular basis in a coordinated fashion that give us a high quality of life on the transportation side of things. We're also known as innovators in the bike and pedestrian space, and we're proposing and are putting through a lot of new projects. And most recently, you may be familiar with our Doyle Street project. Those types of projects, we have others in the queue, and we're working to fund and bring online to help improve livability. As I've mentioned already, we have some really quality parks. We opened Christie Park, which is an extremely well-loved park by residents and visitors alike over in the Christie core. The Doyle Hollis Park has been a mainstay for many years, and we're really excited that next fall, the new park at the Sherwin-Williams site, a 2-acre open space that will include a community garden, basketball court, a children's playground, and a dog park, as well as some unencumbered open space, will open a new neighborhood park to the neighbors in that area as well. We also are known as a city of art and innovation. There's a lot of cultural opportunities here. So, we're doing a lot of things that other bigger cities do. And the social services that are here are absolutely needed, and we enjoy providing them to folks. And so as we grow as a community, one of the things that we have to always be talking about is how our growing needs are in line with our residents' values and the services that we're providing. This is a process that doesn't come up just in an election year. So just by way of example, the city council and our staff are regularly engaged in a discussion among ourselves and seeking and assessing from residents and business stakeholders alike, what are the unmet needs in the community? So the biggest thing, and you can start putting these in the chat now, because before I flip to the next slides, what are the unmet needs? What are the things that you would like to see? Because we're going to talk about those in a second. What are the things that you would like to see the city providing more of? What are the things that you'd like to see addressed in the city? Where do you think the city could do more or better work in order to improve the quality of life for you as a resident or stakeholder here in our community? So we're in the process of assessing those things. And by way of background, this town hall is not kind of a standalone item. It's part of a longer chain of events. We've been polling our residents for, we pulled them back in the fall and winter to hear from them about what they were interested in, similar to this conversation tonight. What needs are being unmet? What things would you like to see happen? If the city was to expand services and needed to fund that, which things would you be interested in having as potential funding mechanisms? And then we continued that conversation through the spring. So we have about 10 or 11 resident advisory committees, I believe. And those resident advisory committees, our council members sit on them. We have staff liaisons and staff who secretary those committees, who have been providing and prompting discussions at those committees to give them the opportunity to weigh in on this as well. And we posted a survey online in the early half of April, which I'll point out again in a moment, which is an opportunity for all stakeholders in the community to provide direct input to us. And that input, all of that is being collected and gathered, and it's going to be shared with the city council, who's been having an ongoing discussion, continuously evaluating what services and what needs are met and unmet here in the city. So let's just talk about the high level things we've heard so far. So the number one thing we hear across the board from residents, and it's the key thing that all government should do, is provide for the public safety. Public safety and public health are the number one thing the government is created for, and maintaining our police patrols, our 911 emergency response times, which are very, very short, our disaster preparedness plan, and we have been funding our disaster preparedness fund in the unfortunate and hopefully unlikely case of having a disaster, but we recognize where we all live, right? Improving code enforcement and increasing pedestrian safety. Those are all priorities that come from public safety. And so if you have other ideas for things that could be included in public safety as things that we should prioritize, we're looking to hear from you about what those investments could be. So again, you can feel free to put those things in the Q&A. And one of the things that we have on here is, let's see, okay, we got a bunch of things. I'll come back to these so I can go through them all at one time so we can have more of a conversation about it. So there's a lot of good ideas coming through the Q&A already. I appreciate that. So the next item on the list is addressing homelessness. And this is a complex issue, and we get a lot of inquiries from folks about what we're doing on homelessness. The city has a very robust homelessness services outreach program. So we're in contract with Operation Dignity. They're our contract social services provider for people who are unhoused in the community. And they are engaged on a regular basis, multiple times a week, with people who are unsheltered here in the city of Emeryville. It often kind of goes unnoticed, and people wonder what's actually being done. But I can tell you, as somebody who works directly with the city staff, that we actually obtain housing outcomes for a lot of the people we assist. So we've recently, and just in this past week, we had a unhoused member of our community who had been unhoused for almost a year, who finally accepted shelter services after a really long and traumatic life experience, working really closely with our case outreach workers, has engaged those services and is moving into indoor shelter. And so sometimes we understand that there's a lot of frustration in the community about what is going on or not going on or what could be done. And cities have a really important role in this. The county has a responsibility as the mental health and behavioral health provider of services across the county. But the city and our outreach services are really oriented around finding the housing solutions for people where possible. And so this is a program and service that we hear a lot of people asking us to provide more assistance on. And we're interested in hearing your ideas about how we can do that and answering your questions about that this evening as well. The third thing that we've been hearing from people so far is about the COVID-19 response and economic recovery. So supporting small businesses and attracting new businesses and jobs and to create new economic activity is really critical for us. And during the COVID pandemic, I was really proud of the city council. We voted to take our typical facade grant, which is a grant we have every year for small businesses to make improvements to the facade of buildings, put new signs up to identify their buildings when they perhaps take over a space and from an old industrial use into something more contemporary or modern. We converted that into a small business assistance program. So we ensured that our small and minority owned businesses, those mom and pop stores here in town that are really vital to the community's fabric and culturally significant to our history, were preserved. So we offered grants to those businesses, and there were opportunities to match those funds with county funds when the county put some money in as well. So I'm really happy to report that businesses utilize those funds. Those are made available by Emeryville's voters and by through the city council. And we were able to support and help sustain them through a lot of the challenges earlier in the pandemic. But the COVID-19 response is not over, and the economic recovery is not complete. And so as we get to the later slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about how a couple of sectors of the economy in the state and the region in particular are struggling to recover at the same speed, and how that's impacting city services. The next item that we have is public works, which is one of my favorite items to talk about, helping provide multimodal transportation, including adequate transit. So this includes our Emeryville, our 8-to-go service for seniors and people living with a disability, walking, biking, rolling, maintaining, and enhancing our forests and parks and playgrounds. So the city of Emeryville really wants to do some work expanding on parks and playgrounds. And one of the challenges in building those things isn't the desire to build it, it's actually the funding to maintain it. So every time we build something new as an amenity for residents in Emeryville, one of the things that kind of goes undiscussed is the ability to cover the cost of maintaining it, right? And nobody wants us to build a brand new bike bridge or put in a new park and have it be, neglected. We know that some of the playground equipment is in need of repair. We've seen, and that's because those things are really well loved and used. And we love that Emeryville's residents love and use our facilities, and they talk about how great they are. But people come to us really quickly when they notice that the rubber turf at the Doyle Hollis playground at the bottom of the slide needs to be repaired, or that there's a piece of equipment that's a little older, outdated, that parents want us to take a closer look at. And as we bring on new parks this year and playgrounds like the Davenport Park, which will come to the Emeryville Marina area out near Watergate, we stopped and assessed, well, how are we going to sustain these new infrastructure investments, these new public works opportunities? How are we going to keep the bike lanes clean of debris? How are we going to keep those parks, lawns maintained, the medians weeded, keep graffiti off of buildings and public spaces to increase and preserve the Emeryville pride that folks have in what we've done? And one of those things is that's an unmet need, and we hear that from residents right now. And then the last thing on the needs list that I've kind of captured here as at a high level is environmental. And the city of Emeryville's residents are like literally trendsetters when it comes to environmental issues. The people here are more globally conscientious about our impact on the earth and our need to provide for a clean and healthy future on our planet for the people who come after us, better than most places. And I couldn't be prouder of that. Emeryville, the Global Conference of Mayors and the Global Covenant of Mayors give Emeryville consistently an A or an A- rating as among the cities in the nations of the world for our work on these issues. We are moving to clean energy with renewable resource energy at the end of this year. The council has already voted on that. We've made a number of other improvements related to moving our vehicles to electric or hybrid citywide. We've put in solar panels on almost every single city-owned building, which are now independently sourcing energy to our buildings. We've turned all the street lamps into LED lamps, which cut 90% of our cost for those lamps. So we've been looking for ways to not only make our city greener, but also to make it more sustainable. And what we heard from folks is that there are other things that people would like us to do. So storm drain repair and maintenance to prevent flooding, to protect in particular against sea level rise related to creeks and streams, the Temescal Creek. Folks are really concerned about how we can keep pollution out of our community. And we have some things in the works, but there's other work that people would like to see us do. And those types of projects and those types of services are things that have currently been unmet needs that are not currently funded. So what does this lead us to? Well, this is the second question that we're asking you to provide some input on tonight, is there's been some discussion about what could we do to ensure that these services continue. So as I mentioned a little earlier, the city really did well taking care of itself, its small businesses. We also had a rental assistance program for our low-income home renters here in the city to ensure that we didn't have displacement and the loss of key the resident base that we have in the city. So we really did a great job on that. And we've seen a lot of the economy is in a healthier state of recovery. So some of the things that we were worried about taking 3 or 4 years to recover are looking like they're going to recover a little sooner, hopefully, than what we were anticipating. But it didn't get us out of the woods. So in particular, the transient occupancy tax, which you might just commonly know as our hotel tax, that's really suffered. Most of our hotel base and our overnight stays here in the city of Emeryville are funded by people who come here on business trips Monday through Friday. And those people are often spillover guests from people who stay in San Francisco, either for conventions or conferences, or hotels are simply oversold and booked in San Francisco because people are traveling there for tourism and they choose to spill over into Emeryville often. Well, because San Francisco's travel and tourism is very much down, that's impacted other hotels that have benefited from the spillover. And so Emeryville is included in that. And we're a couple $1,000,000 below where we'd like to be, several $1,000,000 actually below where we'd like to be annually in terms of revenues in order to sustain our service level. And those current hotel taxes are paying for our public safety, our public works, our environmental programs, are all the things that we mentioned in the slides before. That's the type of revenue that's covering those things. So the city council is keeping tabs on this and has been watching it very carefully for the last couple of years. And we're at a point where we need to have a discussion about additional sources of revenue in order to sustain the current level of services and address the needs that folks want us to address in the community to continue the quality of life that we enjoy here in Emeryville. So we've talked about what we could do to sustain that. We've had some presentations at city council meetings and at committee meetings, but we are just continuing to analyze the city's current condition. We've made absolutely no decisions. So there has not been an agenda item to vote to put a ballot measure together. There has not been a discussion to select a certain a path forward. This meeting tonight is just one more step in that process for us gathering the information we need in order to be fully informed by you, the residents, as to what it is that we should consider and what things we should consider funding if we were to do this. So no decisions have been made, but we are seeking your input tonight. And we're going to have a discussion about this and all of the input we've been receiving for the past few months at our council meeting on May 17th. So again, no decisions have been made, but now this is where I'm going to turn it over to the Q&A part of the discussion, which is, what do you think? So what did you hear in this presentation that you'd like to know more about? What ideas do you have? What things do you think are missing that you'd like to know more about? And we're going to talk a little bit about your ideas. I can answer questions about any of the things that I've discussed or didn't answer so far related to this. And then once we've completed the questions about this kind of set of issues, with the time that remains, we can talk about general city questions or issues that folks have. So let me open up the Q&A and let's see. All right. Okay, so we have, I have a thank you from Andrew G for working with Caltrans in the city of Berkeley to get results on the cleanup at the Ashby encampment. And I want to thank you, Andrew. I know you and others have emailed us about that. And as was discussed in those emails, you know, the city has been really working closely with Caltrans in Berkeley. It's a complicated jurisdictional issue because that encampment is on a Caltrans right-of-way and mostly situated in Berkeley. We've been really actively engaged. If you follow the news in the mainstream media, there were several lawsuits about removing people from that encampment, and a court ordered recently that Caltrans could assist those people in being relocated to shelter. So we will be staying in touch with Caltrans and continuing to work with them to ensure that those folks are sufficiently and safely sheltered in a way that's safe also for the community, so that Caltrans can begin work that it's going to do around the Ashby interchange. So thank you for, let me find my, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to end my screen share if I can find my cursor. Sorry. There we go. So that way you can, and when I answer some of these, I guess they will pop up in the Q&A box so you can see them. We have a commenter here. Brian Donahue has said, at the onset of the meeting, you said Emeryville residents experience a high quality of life. However, in terms of public parks, Emeryville is the worst in the Bay Area at acres per resident. Can you please don't engage in mindless civic boosterism and give the people the idea that you're doing a better job than you are? So Mr. Donahue, you've been a regular voice at our Parks Committee and at our City Council meetings about this, and the City Council has continuously agreed. I think most people would agree we would love more park space, and we are actively trying to do that. As I mentioned, we are building Davenport Playground out at the marina this year. We are also just got approvals and permits from the Bay Conservation and Development Corporation, which oversees all shoreline work, to put in what's called riprap and restore Point Emery. Point Emery is going to have some new topical landscaping, a newly paved parking area, and it's going to have a decomposed granite trail so that people can walk out and enjoy Point Emery. The City Council also has approved something that we're calling Village Greens, which are opportunities for small parklets and resting areas around the city. It was proposed by Vice Mayor Medina. So while I agree with you that we have more work to do, we're really excited that the council feels the city has been approving these projects and moving us in the right direction. But thank you for that feedback. Mr. Freund has said, I believe the city has met its RENA target, correct? At what point does development undermine the quality of life and sustainability? And is there some projection of a limit on population before we reach that point? Actually, we have not met RENA because they just issued our new RENA cycle, and it has over 1,800 units of housing that the city is required to build. Like any other city in the Bay Area, we have an obligation in an 8-year cycle to build new housing. And the city doesn't build the housing. The city has to simply create the allowable space for housing. And we are going to be reviewing and approving our housing element in the coming months in order to meet that obligation. And so we have in the past met our RENA targets in some categories and not in others, but we are complying with state law and doing what's directed to us in order to ensure that we are a team player, because housing development actually helps us address homelessness and doesn't put more families out on the street. Let's see, Gunnar, I think this is Gunnar Niemi. Hi, Gunnar. Says, hello, John. We have spoken about the vacant lot owned by the welfare department next to the Christie Street Park. At one time you thought it could be expanded to a park by swapping it. Oh, he means the redevelopment agency. Is this a possibility still? Yep. So when we talked about parks and open space, the city council had a study session recently about what we're calling the Christie sites, which are 3 properties the city owns on Christie Avenue's east side along the public market's backside. And the city council has talked about putting affordable housing in 2 of those 3 spots, which is what those properties were purchased for during the redevelopment era, and having that 3rd spot be open space, Gunner. And so, yes, that is still in the plans. The council still has supported that as a concept going forward. And I expect that in the coming 12 months, there will be more council discussion about that. But as was mentioned, when you have new city parks or expanding city parks, the city is hesitant to do that when we don't have the resources to maintain it. We have a set budget for park maintenance in our public works budget. And every year as we add more parks, right, as Mr. Donahue noted, the city, everyone wants us to do that. We would love to do that, but we don't want to add parks and then have them fall into disrepair because we don't have the staff or the resources to maintain them. So one of the goals tonight is to determine whether or not, is to get your feedback as to whether or not there's support for doing these things. So you could type into the Q&A, yes, I support funding for parks if that's something you really want. Yes, I want to see us maintain our public works. We're looking to get your feedback on that tonight, if those are things you support, and then your ideas for how to do that. Okay, Lisa has said, don't forget to mention the Emeryville. We figured out last mile transportation, 100%, Lisa Feldman. You are absolutely correct. We have figured out last mile transportation, and we are held out as a city that's really doing the best on the combination of transit services we offer. We hope that ridership will increase and we can increase the frequency of service when people are returning back from COVID. We're seeing a steady increase in ridership, but we have some work to do. And Lisa also notes that she lives near the subway at 65th and Hollis, and that there's always garbage on the ground. And that comes back to one of our points. So thanks for reiterating that, Lisa. One of our points earlier was public works and trash, right? Trash removal is both a public works issue, but it's also an environmental and quality of life issue. And so we've had that come up frequently among folks, and we really want to address that. But again, in order to sustain that level of services as people continue to visit here and we have new businesses come in, how do we find a way to balance what the residents and community want and what we actually have resources to do? So we're going to continue to listen to your feedback on that. So we have an anonymous attendee who said there seems to be a lot of mail theft around the city. How is this being addressed? This is a great question. It's not necessarily the question to the topic at hand, but I'll briefly address it. So the Postal Service is one of the few things, in fact, probably one of only 2 things I can think of in the city that is completely within the jurisdiction of the federal government. It's run by the federal government. The city council, myself, the staff, we've had multiple meetings with Congresswoman Lee's office. We've had a number of conversations there. It was reported to us that the mail key, the postmaster's master key had been stolen or taken, and that it was being used to access some mailboxes in apartment buildings in particular around the city. And so we have asked that the buildings be rekeyed. That is up to the federal government to do because we do not have proprietary rights over those keys. But we are working with the Congresswoman's office to try to get that addressed in the places where it remains to be unaddressed. But it also comes back to the public safety issue and the ability for us to provide safer environments and safer residential spaces in the community is, again, a matter of adequately funding the services that we have. Okay, let's see. Let's go to someone who hasn't asked a question yet. So Lauren says, public safety, what non-police services do you have for mental health responses? So that's a really great question, Lauren. In terms of non-police services, we partner with Alameda County. And so if and Operation Dignity. So if we have a person who's unhoused, we have a couple officers who are trained as homeless liaison officers who will reach out and directly contact Operation Dignity so that they can do a visit, a wellness check. They can check in on the well-being of a person. Sometimes they join an officer if a situation involves a person we don't already know, or perhaps there's a concern that the person is at risk of harming themselves. So we do try to provide those services. But one of the things we're really trying to also do is partner with the county, because the county is under state law tasked with providing and funding mental and behavioral health services. And so we really work on relationship management at the county level as well. And we've asked the county to increase funding in their budget to expand and increase the available mental health and social support services necessary, because we agree we don't want to emphasize and rely on police officers to address solely mental health or human crisis situations that are not necessarily public safety threats, because there's a lot of need to have the police services dedicated to those things that are actually in need of a police response. Let's see. Granger says, can you please prioritize safety at the intersection of Powell and Commodore? So that's out at Watergate. People are constantly running that stop sign in both directions. Policing and issuing tickets doesn't seem to stop people from running the stop signs at all times a day. Yeah, so this comes back to the street safety discussion. Thanks for the question, Granger. So this is just another idea we've heard throughout the discourse, residents in neighborhoods talking about some driver behavior being unsafe and dangerous in residential communities. And there are different ways to fix this, right? As you noted, I think really great point, Granger. Enforcement is only one tool, and it doesn't always work. We can't station a police officer at every corner to watch for these things throughout the day. That would be an extremely expensive approach for the city to take, but we can find ways to hybridize those things, right? So a combination of perhaps some level of enforcement, but also how can we make better infrastructure? So one of the things that the city is looking at is how can we quiet or slow streets down, right? Are there improvements we can make? But those are things that, again, would need a capital investment and a commitment from residents that this is a priority, and also probably some assistance on the financial side in terms of maintaining those things, because anytime you build something, it gets used and then it has to be maintained. But I really appreciate that input, and it's something we have heard before. Andrea Eggers says, public safety. I would like more ways to get to know your neighbors, which would lead to better neighborhood communication and safety. Andrea, this is a fantastic suggestion. I 100% endorse this. We do have parks are one natural way for people to get together. And we do have some neighborhood groups that have formed their own cohorts. So it's probably a great time for me to introduce the fact that I do offer myself up as a person to come to your HOA or your neighborhood or your home to participate in a local town hall. There are some folks I see on here whose names I know because they regularly attend town halls that I participate in with their HOA or their apartment building. I've gone to address single subject issues like, hey, how can we address this thing in our neighborhood, to general needs in the city, or just questions about things that are going on that people want updates on. But I think that your point about how do we get to know our neighbors more comes from doing a couple things that the city council has already prioritized, like people-oriented spaces, right? So to Mr. Donahue and other people's points, we're really trying to increase and expand the availability of park space and safe active transportation space, because when you combine those things and people feel they can walk and bike safely in the community, then they get out of their cars and they engage other people. I've been happy to see officers on bicycles recently. We really encourage our officers to engage with members of the public. That's how conversations happen. They feel more accessible to residents, and we want residents to know that you can approach an officer in the city of Emeryville and talk to them about what's going on, because they're trusting on you to be the ears on the grounds. But I also think we don't need an officer to create public safety and communication in our communities. And so if you have specific suggestions or things that would be unique to your neighborhood, we'd love to hear those things so that the city can be as supportive as possible and helping facilitate a discussion about how to make those things possible. So Andrea, really appreciate your discussion. Okay, Judith Timmel has, we need to improve storm drainage, especially in certain problem areas. I live near 55th and Doyle Street, and this corner of the 5500 block of Doyle regularly floods during heavy rains. I've reported it to the city and received inadequate responses, such as we'll clear the drains in a couple of times a day. What is needed is improved infrastructure. So there are some projects, Judy, that are already in the works. I know that 55th and Doyle is not on the current list, I don't believe. I can check on that. But in terms of storm drains, there is a lot of work to do on that. And Powell Street is a place where I know that there's a lot of attention, and EBMUD is the kind of the guiding force for that, is that's a facility and a utility that they give us a lot of input on. But this is a really great example because I know what you're talking about, Judy. It usually happens in the fall when the rains begin and all the leaves come off in the first couple big rains. And what happens is those big leaves from those trees cover the storm drains, or they clog the storm drains, and the water backs up. And I think this comes back to a service issue, right? So we would love to have staff in a position to proactively, in advance of a storm, do an additional sweep of a street, or do an additional a preemptive storm drain clearing. But right now our staff operate on the budget we have, which only allows us to kind of do what we're doing, because it would require either adding staff, which we would like to do for public works in particular, or expanding service times or the frequency of work, all of which comes at some cost to us. So we're looking at this and other issues and trying to prioritize, as was noted in the prior slides, what we could do to make these things tangible for us. So Judy, agree with you that we need to prioritize this. Let's see. Denise says, I would like to see more EV charging stations. I would also like to see upkeep of the Doyle Street playground area. The slide has been out of service for a year and the mat is damaged. You nailed it on the head. We agree with you. And this comes back to the conversation point about having maintenance funds available. So having some revenue available to make sure that we've got the resources necessary, some pot of resources, so that when the mat does go bad, or the slide at the playground, as I know, needs to be replaced or repaired, we don't have to make other changes to our budget and decide what other program or service to cut. We simply have resources available to us that are dispensable to keep and maintain our existing infrastructure at that high level. So thank you for noting that. And staff are on this Zoom webinar, by the way, taking copious notes about, as they have been at every committee meeting, about what you all are providing as answers. Lisa Feldman says the bridge. I know you love that bridge, Lisa, and I do too. And we're going to keep that bridge in top quality condition. Let's see. I'm just looking first for anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak. Scrolling down, lots of comments. Fran, what sites are specifically currently zoned for the additional 1,800 units of the city of housing you've mentioned? They're not yet, Fran. The 1,800 units of housing are eligible to be built in the current zoned areas. The city is not going to necessarily specifically choose a place to zone 1,800 units. The housing element is about developing policies and programs, is what they're known in the housing element law, for the city to adopt, that would enable the possibility of creating those spaces, or allowing that to be built. So that discussion hasn't taken place yet. The city council, I believe in June, will have a study session to review some of the proposals staff has for how we could accommodate those units in the future, in the coming 8 years. But we have not made any decisions at this point on that. Let's see. Celeste Burrows says, new developments increase the number of car trips through congested parts of Emeryville per day. Will the city require that developers provide ways to reduce the number of car trips through Emeryville by an equal number to what their development will add through Emeryville? Or will the needed extra safety and traffic improvements for residents be the responsibility of the city and the residents to pay for? So great question, Celeste. It's a couple questions together. So the first thing I would say is that we do require developers to provide for transit demand management programs or plans. So they have to provide for us, and it has to be approved through the planning commission process, how they're going to accommodate the new trip demand that is created by creating new buildings. And that's that depends on the building size and whatnot. And then in terms of your second question, traffic safety and transportation was one of the slides I had. And we understand that as a city grows, which cities do, and that's a natural part of just the evolution of an urban area, that there will be increased safety impacts for the city. And so the city has a shared responsibility. One of the things we're really careful to do is that when new projects come online, we try to ensure that our development code is written in a way that ensures that a new developer provides community benefits in the form of other types of improvements to ensure that livability and these types of impacts are mitigated as much as possible. It's not always possible to mitigate all those impacts from a single development's construction. And so there are times where the city does have to provide additional resources in order to make that happen. I'm really happy that a lot of times in the case of our city, we are able to do that without asking residents to expend additional money. So a couple great examples, the Quiet Zone project, which is going to be under construction this year, was delayed by the railroad company to actually put fully gated fenced crossings with double arm gates and sidewalks and bike lanes at 65th and 67th streets and a closure of 66th Street. That safety enhancement is coming essentially at no cost to the city of Emeryville. Our proposal won a state CTC grant. And so, and the county matched some of the money that was necessary to finish the project. So what we do in a lot of cases for these projects where there are impacts, right? And who's going to necessarily pay for that? There isn't really a private developer who can be tapped for that. So in those cases, we are really competitive and apply for funding from other sources to help us build those improvements. And the same thing happened with the Doyle Street project. So the county offered a $75,000 grant to cities during COVID to turn any COVID temporary project into a permanent project. So we applied and got a grant, and that's why the Doyle Street split lane with the two closed blocks that connect the Greenway to Doyle Park, it was made possible. So we use a combination of resources to do that. But it's the ongoing maintenance, even after it's built, it's not usually the ongoing maintenance falls back to the city because it's a public right of way. And so it gets used a lot and we need to be in a position to maintain it for everybody here. Okay. So let me just see. Diane Z, what is being done to address the camp at the end of the Ashby Shellmound exit? People walk on or across it and it's dangerous. I realize it's on the border with Berkeley, but it's Emeryville adjacent and there's glass and garbage. My dog won't walk there to the aquatic park. He starts to shake because of the dangerous trash in the area. How do we expect people to come visit the city that's welcome? So thank you, Diane. So this is a particularly, I mentioned it earlier, but if you or others weren't here when we talked about it, it's a particularly complex issue because as you noted, pretty much the entire encampment is situated within the Berkeley and Caltrans right-of-way. Our staff are really great and are in partnership with them working on it. There have been a couple of court cases. If you haven't followed the media, the court recently ruled that Caltrans can relocate the people who are there to shelter. So they're going to begin that process at some point in relatively near future, I would imagine. But that's a Caltrans driven process and we provide support. The city offers shelter and housing to folks and we have been doing outreach to people in that encampment. And as it relates to the removal of trash and debris, this comes back to the point of this meeting is we'd love to do that more consistently and more regularly, but we're currently a little budget constrained. And so we're looking to hear from folks about what their priorities are. So I won't assume this is your priority, Diane, but maybe it is because it sounds like it's a personal walk for you every day. And that would be a great place to access the aquatic park. And so what we want to do is we want to hear is there support for things like what Diane is proposing so that we can better narrate the need for why we need to do what we're doing to other stakeholders here in the community. Okay, let's see. Deborah Rubenstein, are there design requirements for the parking eating space that will include safety design concepts to protect the businesses from cars plowing through their front doors, as has happened at least 2 restaurants in the area in the last year? This is a really specific question, Deborah. There's a lot of opportunities and ways for us to address safety. One of them is to reduce the demand for driving as much as possible by giving people more pedestrian prioritized spaces. The development code provides for guidance on parking and how parking is designed, and it would be really site specific, but I can understand the apprehension of going to eat somewhere where parking is right in front of the eatery and the concern about drivers being attentive. So that's just another safety consideration. And that also comes back to how we safely design and maintain our city. Let's see. Yeah, somebody noted Caltrans has already cleared up a majority of the encampment. Okay, I'm going to go back to questions that haven't been answered. Let's see here. Scrolling down. Okay. So Mr. Donahue asked if critics of City Hall, those with different ideas, get to serve on city committees. We encourage anybody to apply for a city committee. In fact, I really appreciate you asking that question, Mr. Donahue, because what I'd love to do is actually show everybody how they can be more involved. So let me pull that up. Okay. So this is the city's home webpage, and I just want to take people on a really brief journey through how this webpage is helpful to you. So several things I'll point out. One is right here on the top of the home webpage, you'll see council agendas and videos. And if you click it, you can come down here and you can follow any of our meetings by the Zoom link right here, and our agendas are all posted right here. If you miss a meeting, all the old meetings, their agendas and their videos or an audio file are all there for you in case you wish to do that. But on this page as well, if you go right over here to the left, you'll see local boards, commissions, and committees. And this is a great page because this is where a lot of the resident input we've already solicited for prior to tonight's meeting can be found. So we have all these advisory bodies, city committees. So these 5 committees are staffed by council members. And then if you come down here, all of these committees, except for the Housing Appeals Board too as well. These are all staffed by residents. So the residents are members of this committee, and residents, we have the panels here. We have some special ad hoc committees down here at the bottom. And if you were to go into any of these, so let's say you were interested in the Commission on Aging, you can click on this and you can learn all about the Commission on Aging. You can learn about who's on the Commission on Aging, their terms. You can contact the Commission on Aging. There's a council liaison for each committee. So if you want to know more about what the Commission on Aging is doing, Councilmember Martinez is our contact for that. And you can reach the whole committee by email here. So there's an opportunity to do that. But likewise, when you're back on this page and you get onto the committee page at the top here as well, you'll see that there's an opportunity to apply. And so you can apply for a city advisory committee and right here, and this will take you straight to the application. You can complete an application. And if you're like, well, wait a second, Mr. Bowders, I don't know which committee. Well, here's the vacancies. So here's a list of all the vacancies. And so there's the definitions. And then you can see we have a number of them that are coming up because we currently our terms end in June. So a lot of people are going to have opportunities to reapply, but we also love to meet and hear from new applicants to serve on our committees. So if one of these subjects down here is of interest to you, housing, parks, the Planning Commission, the Public Art Committee, these are really great places to get more engaged in the city and become more familiar with what the government is doing. So we encourage you, Mr. Donahue, to apply. You don't have to, you can be a critic of the city council. I have voted for people who I don't share a personal viewpoint with because it's the diversity of our viewpoints that make it possible for us to have the best discussion at committees. While I'm here, I want to take you back to the homepage just to show you that if you haven't completed the survey, you have a chance to complete the survey right here. If you click join the conversation right at the top of our homepage, it'll take you to, whoops, I hit the contact page. Well, you can contact everybody here on this page. Let me go back to the homepage. And as this cycles through, give it a moment. Actually, you can just go right here to join the conversation. It's the top one right now. And then you can come to this page here. Tells you a little bit about what we've been doing. So this is the process we've undertaken. There's news flash here. You can go to the full page if you'd like. I'm looking for, not what I wanted. Let me go back one page. So if I just click on it here, I want the survey. Yeah, click on the main page. Here's all the information for tonight's meeting. And then down at the bottom, there's the survey for essential city services. And you can give us all of the information that you'd like to give. There's no deadline to provide this information, but if you provide answers to our questions by Friday, it will be included in the city council packet that goes on Friday. So the council will all get to see what your input was on this item. Okay, so that is how you can join this conversation. You can also, if you want to email it to us instead, you can email us at join the conversation, just like it says right here in one text. I think it's probably on this page. There it is, join the conversation at emeryville.org. So you could email your thoughts to us if you would prefer that method for reaching out to us. Let's see. I'm going to end this share screen, come back, and go back to our Q&A. Okay, so answered that question from Mr. Donahue. Lisa Feldman asked if all the power lines are undergrounded. Is that something we can do if we haven't done it already? So we do have a ordinance that requires when new development comes in that the developer has to underground the utilities adjacent to their site. So we are undergrounding as we go. Sometimes the city will add on requests of developers in lieu of some of the fees they pay to complete like a block or something that might be left undone without them doing that. So we do require undergrounding, and that is a safety goal and an infrastructure goal for the city to make our cities safer. So we've answered these. Let's see. All right. Let's see. Please address the empty storefronts in the city. So the question from Judy Timmel is addressing storefronts in the city. So this is an economic development opportunity for the city. And as was noted earlier, we're having a lot of success in securing new businesses, but as is noted, there's some retail storefronts that are empty. If you have specific ideas about how to accomplish that, we're really open to that idea. Also, our Economic Development Advisory Committee, one of those resident committees, takes up that issue. It's really hard to compel a private property owner to put or install a specific type of business in their building. There's a free market for them to solicit the rents that they want. And if that's not a right match, the city does have a really awesome employee named Chad Smalley, who is our economic and community development manager, I believe is the title. And I might be wrong about that, but he does a great job liaisoning with all of our businesses in the community and prospective businesses. So we get a lot of everything from independent artists who are looking for studio space to large corporations that are looking to build lab buildings or find lab space in the city. Chad serves as a conduit for them. And I myself actually meet with a ton of prospective business owners in the city, and I regularly connect them with property owners about unused space in the hopes that we can fill vacant storefronts wherever possible. Question is there a way to get some reflectors or coloring on the trash cans on the Doyle Street bike lane? The trash cans in the street blend in to the road too well. This is a really phenomenal comment, and I'm glad staff are listening. This would just be another item that we could put on the list of things that we'd like to do. And again, it's just a matter of resources. Are there any solar panel programs for homeowners? That's a great question. So I'd like to ask if the person could email Nancy Humphrey. You're anonymous, so I can't follow up with you directly. If you'd like to email Nancy Humphrey or call City Hall, Nancy Humphrey is our environmental programs coordinator, and I'm sure she could let you know about opportunities to get that's not stipends. What's the right word? There's both loans and grants. There's some opportunities to do that, I believe, in the county. Let's see. We are right along the freeway. Do we need to pay attention to the pollution as a social determinant of health? People in the hills don't have the same exposure. We do need to pay attention, and we do pay attention. So I serve as the vice chair of the regional air district for the 9-county region, do a lot of work on air pollution control. The only thing that we don't get to regulate is mobile sources, which the state regulates. So cars and trucks is regulated by the state. I sit on a board that regulates cement factories and refineries and landfills. But we do need to pay attention to that. And one of the reasons we're trying to build more livable and green spaces and do our part to with our climate action plan is to mitigate and address those issues. Let's see. So we've got question: to get more revenue, can we shift funds from Measure C, which was passed a couple years ago, and adjust where the funds go? So we cannot do that. That's an infrastructure bond to pay for housing, and it has an expenditure plan and an oversight committee associated with it. So I will, if we don't have, I see some questions now on revenue, so I'm happy to talk about the couple of things that we've seen so far as ideas. Maybe I should move to that now. So yeah, how do we get revenue from 30,000 people who work in Emeryville? Well, let's talk about that. So the opportunity we have, so we have something already in place called a real property transfer tax. And the number one thing at the outset that I would mention is the city council is considering a number of items, but the priority of the city council is how can we fund these things without impacting residents as much as possible? How can we not make this a tax that will impact residents further. And as was noted by, Lisa here with 30,000 people, and Ron Freund, what do we do that's equitable? Those are perfectly queued up questions for me to talk about the real property transfer tax. So under our current real property transfer tax, it's a one-time tax that is paid at the time a transaction on property takes place. So you're either the buyer or a seller. It could be a home or it could be a business. But there's an opportunity at the real property transfer tax. That's the opportunity for that transfer tax to take place. So you're not paying this annually like a property tax. You're paying it one time when you sell your house and you leave, or you're paying it when you buy a house and you move into the city. And those are negotiated between the buyer and the seller as to how taxes are divided up for anyone who's made a purchase before. So we have a tax that's currently in place, but it's not equitable, to Ron Freund's really great point. It is not necessarily the most equitable tax. Why is that the case? Because it's the same for the valuation of any type of property. So a person who has a $350,000 condo at Watergate, or a person has a $400,000 condo at PPP, or you own a $500,000 house in the Triangle, or you own a $600,000 townhouse up on Doyle Street. If you own a property that's in that range, and then we have something like the Novartis building, which sold for $155 million, the tax rate is the same. And so is that equitable is the question, right? So residents live here, the assessed value, the real value of their home is in this lower basket of assessment, and they're paying the same tax rate as a property which has an assessed value much higher and is transferring for far much more money. And the purpose of that property, in most cases, those larger transactions, those really expensive transactions, is oriented around people who visit the city, who bring impacts into the city, either as a business, as commercial, consumer, visitor, other non-residential impacts, right? And so how do we more equitably balance the obligation of these larger property owners or stakeholders to contribute? So one option that we have had presented to us, and to be really clear, we've made no decisions. We've got other options available to us. We're still collecting information, but one that we've taken an interest in talking and learning more about is this real property transfer tax and tiering it. So tiering, T-I-E-R-I-N-G. So in other words, creating a more equitable and balanced system where one of the ideas is to create several categories. So for example, if your property transfers for $1 million or less, that there is no change in the tax, no increase whatsoever. So keeping residents in a equitable category of transfer tax that's the same rate as it always has been and not increasing it. And then saying, well, what if for a property that transfers at a rate of, for value of 1 to 2 million, we increase it a small amount. And then if it's for a property that transfers for over 2 million, we increase it a more significant amount. So creating kind of tiers so that as the property value goes up because it's a larger property, it's a more valuable property, that those larger, more commercial properties pay a higher tax rate in order to fund services that they are most likely having a disproportionate impact or demand for here in the city. Greater demand for public safety, fire inspections, greater demand for public safety with police response, greater demand for code compliance, public works needs, impacts on streets by people driving here, utility use, environmental impacts, trash and garbage in parking lots or other spaces that are created near these buildings. We've heard from a lot of you already about these kind of concerns. A lot of them are situated around bigger buildings that are non-residential. And so one of the options we have, and I would love to see questions come in about this idea, is how do folks feel about something like that would be tiered to allow for there to be some form of breaking out the rate at which people pay, so that residents, when they, again, one-time tax, would sell their house, since almost most houses in Emeryville sell for about $1 million or less, would be paying the standard rate that they pay now at that transfer. Whereas some of these more expensive properties, maybe smaller properties or very expensive houses that are in a $1 to $2 million range would pay a little bit more, but above $2 million in a transfer would pay a significantly higher rate to help fund city services. Some initial estimates are that type of like tiering could generate in a good year $3 to $4 million of revenue, which could be used to fund these very needs that we're talking about, right? The city has identified that we have about that much of an unmet need in order to sustain and fund these services. And so we're looking for ways and ideas for balancing this in a way that will allow us to generate those resources. So I'm going to go down and see if we have comments. Let's see. Trying to find the new comments. I guess I'll start at the bottom here. Okay, so I have Mr. Donahue, tiered real property transfer tax. Yes. Judy Timmel, I approve of the tiering of a transfer tax. Yes. Lisa Feldman, I love the tiering. Is it worth indexing to something so that tiers automatically adjust? That's a great question. I will ask staff to collect that question for discussion, please. I don't know if we can do that in a measure, but we might be able to. Thank you for that question. One concern with ballot measures for public funds is that a lot of the funding will end up going to funding police equipment over time. How can we know that that won't happen this time? So actually on the public funding of police equipment, the city council actually began a discussion around, there was a state bill about military equipment, and we're continuing that conversation, but I'm really happy to report that the things that were enumerated specifically in the state statute around military equipment, the city doesn't have those things as specified enumerated items that are listed there without exemptions or pre-existing equipment. But we can, in a ballot measure, we can choose what we make those funds available for, right? So that's an option. So if there's a question about how do we have it go to X, Y, or Z thing, that's why we're soliciting your feedback tonight. What would you like it to go to? So which of the needs we're talking about would you like to prioritize? And if it's a need that you are interested in is not here, what is it? Okay. Is there a precedent for such a progressive transfer tax, and has the city attorney checked on the legal issues? Yeah, we have done a preliminary legal review. It is common to have transfer taxes like other cities. Our neighboring cities actually do have tiering. So Berkeley and Oakland have tiering, and that's one of the reasons we're looking at this option, because ours is flat, and we think that's inequitable, and it's an untapped opportunity for us to generate additional revenue. So thank you for that, Ron. Eugene agrees tiering is good. Thank you. Fran asks, I would like to know how businesses contribute annually to city service costs for the 30,000 additional daytime costs. I'm not sure if you're saying contribute in the form of creating the costs or if they're contributing in terms of resources. I think it's probably self-explanatory on the contributing in terms of actual costs that as businesses bring people into the city, and that is a demand on services. How do they contribute to city service costs? So they only right now, they pay in certain ways, right? So we have a business license tax, but we have one of the lowest business license taxes, and some people argue we should increase it, but there's a challenge with increasing business license taxes. We can consider that for sure. We can consider a business license tax. There's some challenges associated with that because businesses that are in multiple jurisdictions can simply report, in some cases, their revenues in whatever place they want for the more favorable tax rate. Other ways they contribute. So we have sales tax, right? So we fund some of our existing services off of sales taxes. So the city has a very small local sales tax of a 1/4 of a penny, which is merged with all the other sales taxes the county charges. So we receive an amount of revenue from that that's through Measure F that's dedicated to public safety and childcare services in the city. Let's see. Do we have other comments? I don't see other comments. So far, everybody who's responded about tiering has been generally supportive of a couple questions as well. So that's really appreciated for that feedback. Here we go. Lauren says yes to tiering. I'm wondering if a fourth tier can be added for under 500,000 for the city to continue to place supports for low-income folks. So what we could talk about that, but what we're trying to, I think, do is doing that would actually decrease. It would create new issues for us to solve with the tiering. So our goal is to baseline. We want to make sure that folks know that that we're maintaining the status quo. I think we've talked about in the initial discussion about this option, when we looked at all the options to talk about with residents, we wanted to set as a baseline nothing, keeping residents where they're at and not increasing cost to residents wherever possible. Okay, if tiering is adopted in Emeryville, perhaps make it slightly less than the neighboring cities so it doesn't drive away Emeryville interest. Thank you for that feedback, Andrea. Do others have input on the... So, okay, so Fran's question is, can the businesses employing these wonderful employees pay annually? They do pay annually. I guess I don't understand. They pay annually. They pay a business license tax annually. Let's see. I'm going to go up to other questions people have just asked along the way. Are there EV charging station assistance programs for homeowners? I believe this is the case. I did get this question from a resident recently. There is a grant program. There are a couple. One of them is through the Air District and one of them is through East Bay Community Energy. If you were to email either Nancy Humphrey probably or Councilmember Martinez, I think she's the chair of the East Bay Community Energy Board. She would be able to let you know. She's really an expert on the EV charging station issue, Denise. Let's see what else we have here. So there's a question about, is the Panera site going to be replaced by a Chick-fil-A? And is there an opportunity for public comment? That is a administrative review. It is not a public hearing. It doesn't require any changes to the current existing conditional use permits for the site. So it is simply processing a rebranding of the building more or less with minor planning or minor planning director review. Yeah, Judy notes that it goes back to the storefronts. Developers seem to let them go empty. They should be charged for their empty spaces. That's one revenue idea, Judy. And Vice Mayor Medina actually early on discussed vacancy taxes. There are a lot of questions about how to accurately and fairly implement them, but agree with you that that's an opportunity that should further be discussed. Thank you. Matt Solomon says, is it possible for Emeryville to run more frequently and run regular service on the weekends? Obviously, the cost money, and I'd imagine the same barriers. Yeah, so we have the Emeryville is managed by something called the ETMA, the Emeryville Transit Management Agency. And we have two resident members on that board, Bobby Lee and Betsy Cooley. And so it's run apart from us, and they have their own budget and they manage the services and the schedule. So it is possible they have board meetings, and the public is welcome to go to those if you'd like. I can just report without speaking for them that similar to other transit agencies, they've reported a decline in service. And so in terms of, ridership. And so they've narrowed or cultivated or focused their services around what the current demand is, with the goal of increasing service as demand increases. So I think that that's a better question for the Emeryville as they look at that service system. Let's see. Mateen. This is Mateen. I've been living and working in Emeryville, Christie Avenue for more than 30 years. On our street, it's very dangerous. I myself and the employees were in accidents that other people have caused because of speeding. Is there any way we can get speed bumps on our street? Thank you. This is like previous conversation, traffic and safety improvements. This is an item that is discussed in the Transportation Committee and can be reviewed as part of our active transportation and safe streets programs. These things can be reviewed. We can't make commitments. I can't make a commitment on a given meeting like this to a particular project, but again, coming back to what it is that we have as needs, I think speed bumps is a great need to identify, opportunities to slow traffic. There were some recent fires at homeless encampments in West Oakland near Beach Street where firefighters could not reach the fires due to blocked pathways. Can fire prevention and frequent inspections be utilized to reduce density of encampments? Is Emeryville considering a vacancy tax on uninhabited residential units? To the last question, that's just another item for us to put on the list as a suggestion for the council discussion, vacancy taxes. To your question about fire inspections. So one of the things I have been pushing for as one member of council that I know the other council members have supported has been, we don't actually have a dedicated code enforcement officer. That's probably going to sound crazy. We have a building official, we have a planning director, we have a public works director, we have a city attorney, but we don't have a dedicated code official who does code inspections. So whenever we receive a complaint about a code related issue, we have to kind of cobble together those other folks and send them almost as a team to do this. The city has wanted to hire a code enforcement person for the safety of buildings. We've seen buildings, collapse in Florida that were old. We've heard from residents like Fran, who I believe is still on, about how do we deliver some of those things. We've really wanted to add a code enforcement officer. We had a couple houses that went abandoned, one after a fire, and there were squatters in it, and neighbors were concerned about the safety and condition of that property. And with a dedicated code official, we can maintain our city a lot better. And that's just one thing we could pay for with the revenue. So appreciate that question, because it gave me an opportunity to talk about an unmet need there. Let's see here. Eugene Sway asked about the Emeryville Code of Ethics. That's an item before the Budget and Governance Committee. It's on an agenda for later this year. You're welcome, Diane. Let's see, I'm just kind of going through and taking things that are, okay, can you provide more signage that 41st Street is one way? So Denise, thanks for that question. We actually have had preliminary discussions about how to do exactly that and to make it safer for kids leaving school with bike and pedestrian, and what we could do in particular at San Pablo and 41st, so that cars aren't invited into that thinking they can make a right turn there anymore. So yes, we are looking at that. And how do we, again, this comes back to how do we best leverage our money? We're trying to integrate that into our paving plan. So what can we do to integrate that into our paving plan so it's part of an existing project to save the city money? Let's see. Thank you, Lisa. Alameda County is not moving fast enough on mental health, and you're welcome for the advocacy. Yep, I agree. There's transit stop trash. Thank you, Anonymous, is an issue that we have also identified, and it's been previously mentioned to us as something that we could do better on. Let's see. There's a question here about opening City Hall after COVID-19. City Hall has been open for quite some time, but in terms of city council meetings, that is a decision that the council makes, and I won't speak for the rest of the council. We have to make a finding every 30 days, whether to continue our meetings over Zoom like this or do them in person. I will just let you know, Mr. Donahue, that we are, staff and I are having a conversation about the preparedness of staff and the city council chambers to welcome people back, hopefully sometime this year, but we will continue to do what is in the best interest for the health and safety of our residents, and not simply bring us back just to bring us back. But I do agree with you that in-person meetings would be great, and we can do that. And you asked if critics can serve on committees. Yes, you can. You want to see me answer it? I just answered it. So you can serve on a committee as a critic, Mr. Donahue. We're looking for your qualifications and your interest as to why you're interested when we consider that. Answered that question. Let's see. There's no updates on the Trader Vic's parking lot development at this time. All that happened was a what we call a pre-submittal meeting, where there was interest from a developer who's working with that property owner about to come in and meet our planning staff. That was at the beginning of the year, and no follow-up meeting has happened. So Fran asked about the Q&A. If you click on the Q&A, you can see the Q&A as the questions are answered. But this video will be provided on the city's website at some point on that same page I showed you at some point in the coming days, so that everyone who missed this meeting or who wants to go back to it can go back to it. Mr. Freund asked says I'm doing a great job reaching out to the people I represent. How can I be an example to inspire my colleagues to do the same? This is a good question. I should say this also now, and my house gets a little dark. Let me use technology to make my situation a little bit better for all of us. So I do appreciate the question. So if you're interested in having me come and visit and do a town hall at your HOA or apartment building, or if you live somewhere else and you'd like to have somebody come in and meet with you and listen, I'm available to do that. My email is also on that council page. It's my first initial and my last name, so jbowders@gmail.com. In fact, I'm going to type an answer to this question so you have it there, and people who are watching can take it down. Oops, if they'd like. And I'm available to do that at any point. The city council is they're engaged. They all have, this is technically a part-time council, and so we all have jobs and we all work full-time, and we receive a stipend for our participation on the council. And I don't hold it against any of my colleagues as to their availability in relation to mine. I think together as a team, we do our very best to represent and support all of Emeryville's residents, and each of us contribute in our own ways. And if this is the way in which I contribute, I'm happy to be a team player in that respect. They all serve on committees and resident advisory committees, and they are responsive to resident inquiries. And so if you have a question for any of them or wish to learn their perspective, I strongly encourage you to reach out to any of them, as I find them all to be fabulous human beings. Mr. Donahue, I answered your question. You're welcome, Larry. Yeah, Fran, if you're welcome as well. And if residents or attendees want to send miscellaneous comments about these topics, can they do so to you? Maybe state your email. Yep, I got ahead of me, Fran, and I didn't see it in time. My email is out there, and you can, it's jbowders@emeryville.org. Yes, Mr. Donahue, other cities have opened their council meetings, and I anticipate that the city of Emeryville will do so too. I don't have a lamp in front of me. Sorry, anonymous. Let's see. I know of at least one city hall critic that is not allowed to serve on a council committee. Okay. All right. I think we have exhausted the primary questions. I'm just checking to make sure I didn't miss there's a bunch of comments that are just like thank yous. Okay, okay, Mr. Donahue, bike boulevards, following the general plan to calm traffic. By following the general plan, I mean literally each of the 5 boulevards needs traffic counts and the required traffic calming. Thank you. It's a staffing function. We would love to have the capacity to do all these things. Thank you, Mr. Donahue, for your input on boulders. Okay. Mr. Donahue's feedback. Mr. Donahue, you have a lot of feedback. Thank you. Hi, Gunner. Okay. I am just going to do one last check. You're welcome, Bonnie. And how do we get more indie businesses and retail here? It's a combination of a couple things, Bonnie. It's hard. I wish there was a magic potion. There was a question similar to yours about what do we do about kind of vacant retail stores. I know it's not the same thing, but there's a similar vein there. It's kind of challenging because commercial retailers and commercial property owners, it's the market is what they can choose to rent for. And so there were some questions earlier about, can the council consider a vacancy tax? Those are all things we can bring back to the discussion with the council to talk about as one of the potential ideas for what to do. But in terms of securing and luring indie businesses, I will tell you, I do get inquiries from a lot of businesses. I talk to them regularly. They reach out and we have conversations about what they're looking for. And Chad Smalley, who's one of our phenomenal staff members here in the city, he and I will often share information or contacts so that he can help introduce people to places where they might be able to find a tenancy or fit. But it is hard, and it's largely driven by cost. And unfortunately, smaller businesses, their financing models aren't always as easily sustained in a high rent area like the inner East Bay. So we do regularly face challenges with that, but there are opportunities. The public market has, for example, been an incubator for fledgling food culinary businesses, and some of them have gone on to open their own restaurants and do other things. And I think that that's a positive step forward, and we would love to provide other spaces like that. So thinking more on the solo space, we're really hoping that the Art Center can move forward at some point, because there's a lot of opportunity to help support indie artists and solo artists with their own businesses by creating makerspace and shared workspaces for people. So these are things that we can do to support those types of businesses. But I agree that there's some challenges to doing that right now. So thanks for your question. Yeah, and Bonnie, I totally agree with you on the pedestrian space. That's a big priority for us. Is we know that creating more active transportation spaces really actually induces small local serving businesses. So we think that that's really important. Let's see. So this was sent out. There's a question about why this wasn't sent out via Twitter. It was sent out via the city's Twitter handle, I believe, and it was sent out via Newsflash, which I'm happy to show everybody how to use. So let me pull that back up for everybody. And where's my share screen? So we were back here, folks, if you can recall. And so on this page, if folks would like to, let me find our main page. So if you'd like to sign up, there's two things. There's Newsflash right here, and there's receive notifications right here. And right here on the top of the page, it's been here for several weeks now for folks to access. And people who sign up for any of our guides can sign up for the guides here. You have all kinds of options that you can opt into. You can provide your email address, ask to be subscribe via a text or an email if you'd like on this page. And similarly, on the Newsflash page, you can join the conversation. It was right here at the top, and we posted that just over 3 weeks ago. And you have the ability to get those via the Newsflash, and you can sign up for the Newsflash right here. Notify me. Any of those options are right here on the page. And we had a program to send out information almost every day this past week. We had a text share with Emeryville residents. So residents got text messages and reminders about it. And I pushed it out through my personal blog as well at the end of last week as a reminder to folks. So I hope that answers the question. We did, let's see, where did the Q&A go? Okay. Can you mention the reworking of the Bay Street model, shifting the destination dining to destination dining instead of retail goods? There's a mix of both, I think, happening at Bay Street right now. So there are some new retail tenants. I've been in conversations with the management and ownership of Bay Street for about a year now, regular meetings with them about their plans on those things. And I never try to get ahead of our local businesses when they make announcements. But they have some new retail goods and retail stores coming, and they will be announcing those, I think, in their own time. But they also recognize that the shape of the kind of the traditional mall approach has evolved, especially due to COVID. And in order to bring people to shopping areas, younger consumers want to have experiences with their friends. So it's a combination of experiences and eating. And there will be a grocery store coming to Bay Street in lieu of where the old Navy building is currently situated. So that construction will be taking place sometime this year. It will begin, I believe. And that will create kind of a new shopping experience for everybody. So it will be a little different than what people have been used to in the past, but I think it's a helpful model for the future. Yeah, Jeff, I agree with you. The public market is a great center of independent business, and there's a lot of good things on the horizon for the public market. You're very welcome, Lisa. You have a nice evening too. And you're welcome, Rita. You're welcome for the text reminders. All right, do we have, okay, well, I feel like some 33 of you have managed to be warriors while the Warriors game is going on and continue through into the second and a half hour or 1.5 hours into this. So I'm going to just wrap up here in the next couple minutes and just remind everybody that, as was noted earlier, you can continue. We've been collecting information and feedback for months through the various committees. We've done polling, we've done phone call conversations, we've had these meetings, and this is the kind of the last big one, but you can continue to provide your survey input online to us. Where we've been gathering that information. And if you can provide it by Friday, it will go in a packet of information to the council for us to consider when we have a continued discussion. No decisions have been made about anything. This is a chance for us to continue to get your feedback tonight so that we are in the best position possible to be informed. And I really heard that folks were generally supportive of the couple ideas that we've been kicking around. And then it sounds like that the things we've been hearing that we have been listening to so far were resonating with you as well, and that those were the same kinds of unmet needs that you'd like to see us address going forward. You're very welcome, Andrea. So with that, I'm gonna do one last call for questions. Before I go here, I got 5 minutes left. I think we will have completed this meeting, but I want to just thank everybody who came out this evening and shared an opinion, gave us an idea, asked a question. Civic participation is really important, and your participation in this meeting, like others that we've had, is welcome here in the city. And again, if you would like to have facilitate some sort of a town hall, either on a specific topic or further discussion on this, you're welcome to email me and we can set something up. At Heather Streets, it was so good to hear from you virtually, Heather. I haven't seen you in a while, and I hope you are doing well. So with that, folks, that's going to conclude tonight's meeting. There's no more questions here at this point that we're going to answer for the evening. It looks like we've covered the questions that have been presented for the evening. So with that, again, thank you so much for your time, and you all have a lovely evening.